Hello and welcome to Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for being with us. On the show last week, we had Claiborne Thornton, founder and president of the Tennessee Home Education Association. We discussed how it came about and how current public school system has not only failed our kids, but has usurped the authority of parents through compulsory attendance laws. We also discussed some pending legislation that Mr. Thornton and his organization have some concerns about that it's working its way through the General Assembly right now. If you missed it, you can find it under past live streams for the February 23rd show. Mr. Thornton and Thea are not the only ones concerned about this legislation and our overreaching state and federal government when it comes to education and parental rights. Our guest tonight is also very concerned and very well versed on the potential ramifications of pending legislation on parental rights. Tiffany Boyd of Free Your Children is our guest tonight. But first, it's time for the Informer Report. Well, we are at war with Iran, and let's hope that it's a short and successful one for us. Keep your head on a swivel for all the terrorists that Biden let into the country that are now a serious threat. A few thoughts for consideration. First and foremost, no matter how much we might feel this was way overdue, President Trump acting alone and being the sole decision maker is not the way it's supposed to work. This was obviously planned for a while and was not in reaction to an imminent threat. Taking offensive action requires congressional involvement. Yes, I know our Congress is crap, but that's what the Constitution says. Our first 5 presidents understood this, as did most of the presidents prior to the 1890s. While many will say the War Powers Act authorizes it, I think that is questionable. Does the War Powers Act actually give the president the latitude, not only President Trump, but others before him, this authority? I would encourage you to read it for yourself, but I want to highlight just some things, a couple of things that I read in the War Powers Act today. And the War Powers Act was passed in November 1973. It was passed after the Vietnam War and greatly in response to that war. And it was a joint resolution concerning the war powers of Congress and the president. The purpose, policy, and role of Congress is how Section 2 is listed. Section 1 is just the title of it. And this came from congress.gov. This is something I found online. Section 2 states that the War Powers Resolution purpose is to ensure that the collective judgment of both Congress and the President will apply to the introduction of United States Armed Forces into hostilities. Doesn't say war, it says hostilities. Section 2B, Section 2C states that the powers of the President as Commander-in-Chief to introduce U.S. Armed Forces into hostilities are limited, exercised only pursuant to a declaration of war or other specific statutory authorization from Congress, or a national emergency created by an attack on the United States or its armed forces. And we'll say that again, created by an attack on the United States or its armed forces. Consultation with Congress, this is Section 3 of the War Powers Resolution, requires the President in every possible instance to consult with Congress before introducing U.S. armed forces into situations of ongoing imminent hostilities and to continue consultations as long as the armed forces remain in such situations. Notification to Congress, Section 4. This is one of the central provisions. It's designed to ensure that Congress is notified of military deployments that could involve the exercise of congressional war powers. Section 4A1 requires the President, in the absence of a declaration of war, to notify the Speaker and President pro tem within 48 hours after U.S. armed forces are introduced into hostilities or into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances. While hostilities is not defined in the War Powers Resolution, the House report accompanying the original measure stated that the term includes not only a situation in which fighting actually has begun, but also a state of confrontation in which no shots have been fired, but where there is a clear and present danger of armed conflict. The report indicated that imminent hostilities includes a situation where there's a clear potential either for such a state of confrontation or an actual armed conflict. Section 4A2 and 3 require the President to report other deployments of U.S. armed forces into the territory, airspace, or waters of a foreign nation while equipped for combat, except for deployments which relate solely to supply, replacement, repair, or training of such forces, or additional deployments in numbers which substantially enlarge United States Armed Forces equipped for combat already located in a foreign nation. Section 4A, notifications must include information on the circumstances necessitating the introduction of United States Armed Forces, the constitutional and legislative authority under which such introduction took place, and the estimated scope and duration of hostilities or involvement, which nobody can really predict that. 4C requires the President to report to Congress periodically and at least every 6 months on continuing deployments of U.S. forces reported under Section 4A. Congressional response to an introduction of U.S. Armed Forces, this is Section 5, sets out possible congressional responses to authorize or terminate an unauthorized presidential use of the military. Pursuant to Section 5A, Section 4, and Section 4A, report of hostilities shall be transferred to both the House Foreign Affairs and Senate Foreign Relations Committee for consideration. Section 5B states that when the President reports an introduction of U.S. Armed Forces into active or imminent hostilities or such report is required under Section 4A but not made, the President must terminate such use of armed forces after 60 days. You know, we keep hearing, well, he's got 60 days. That was not really the way that was intended to be taken. I understand it's been taken that way pretty much since it's been written. But if you read this, if you read the whole thing in context, that was not okay, you got 60 days to do what you want. No, that's not the case. 60 days, unless Congress has declared war or specifically authorized the action, has extended the 60-day period by law, or is physically unable to meet as a result of an armed attack on the United States. The period of deployment can be extended an additional 30 days by the President if the President certifies that unavoidable military necessity respecting the safety of the United States Armed Forces require their continued use in the course of bringing about the removal. Section 5B is sometimes interpreted to allow the President to unilaterally involve U.S. forces in hostilities for any reason for at least 60 days, and I already hit that in a minute. This interpretation might seem at odds with the assertions of limited presidential war powers in Section 2C and Section 8D2, which states that the War Powers Resolution does not confer any presidential authority to involve U.S. armed forces in hostilities. Under Section 6, the 60-day period seems to serve primarily as a window for Congress to possibly authorize an otherwise unauthorized use of the military. Under Section 5C, Congress may require the President to remove U.S. forces from unauthorized hostilities at any time by a concurrent resolution. I think that's been changed to a joint resolution. And obviously the President could veto that. So the President doesn't necessarily have a free hand for 60 days, and the obvious intent is to ensure the Constitution is followed, with Congress being the branch that authorizes offensive action. The founders were clear, and so is the Constitution. Presidents were never intended to get us in wars or hostilities without congressional approval. Now, you always have the right to return fire. You always have the right to repel. But if you go read about the first 5 presidents and read their take and their understanding on their very limited power when it came to anything offensive. All right, now, Senate Bill 1958, House Bill 1971. By now, many of you have heard about this bill that will end our right to make a facial challenge to the constitutionality of a state law. We did a special on it last week with Richard Archie, and he's done a great job explaining the problem with his bill on his Substack as well. And this is the Tennessee Firearms Association also has more information. Bottom line, this bill, we have to kill this bill, and it is in committee, I want to say, Thursday. Well, let me back up. So the Senate bill, we're not sure when it's going to come back up, but it's coming back up, whether it comes to committee or goes straight to the floor. But we know that House Bill 1971, that's the House version, will be in the House Judiciary Committee this Wednesday, March 4th. We need everyone to call their legislator, their representative, and their senator, as well as the members of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, and tell them to uphold their oath and defend your rights by voting no on House Bill 1971 and Senate Bill 1958. Guys, we cannot let this thing get through. It's got to die, and it's got to die quick. Senate Bill 2214 by Senator Wiley and House Bill 2611 by Representative Halsey. This bill changes the current UCC, and UCC is Uniform Commercial Code in Tennessee, to protect the individual investor, not the big banks. Now, You'll have to look the bill up, but the bottom line is this. The key language in the bill, and I'll explain it a little more as we go along. If a securities intermediary does not have sufficient interest in a particular financial asset to satisfy both its obligations to entitlement holders, you're the entitlement holder, okay? And this is whatever company or bank you're invested with. Okay, entitlement holders who have security entitlements, they call them entitlements now. Your investments are now called entitlements to that financial asset and its obligation to a creditor of the securities intermediary. That's the person, that's the next bank above them, okay? Think of a bigger bank, like a central bank, who has a security interest in that financial asset. Then the claims of the entitlement holders other than the creditor have priority over the claim of the creditor. So in other words, if we have a big crash, right now the way it's written is that money's going to flow up. This in Tennessee means you will get paid. That's what it's, and that bill is The Great Taking by David Rogers Webb, or find the old episode we did on the Tennessee Informer entitled The Great Taking, and we had David Rogers Webb on about a year and a half ago. And Senate Bill 2214 by Senator Wiley will be in the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee tomorrow. House Bill 2611 will be in the Banking and Consumer Affairs Committee tomorrow as well. So need to make those calls. There are a lot of important bills in the General Assembly this week. Please check out tncs.weebly.com, Tennessee Fair Elections. There are several election bills this week. Tennessee Stands, Tennessee Firearms Association, Tennessee Eagle Forum, and Free Your Children. Anything having to do with schools, check out Free Your Children. Anything firearms, Tennessee Firearms, obviously. Tennessee Stands covers a lot of good things. I do want to put a plug in. There's also, I cannot remember the bill number, but I apologize, that Monty Fritz has a bill in committee, I want to say tomorrow. It's the bill to prevent this, if we have another emergency situation like COVID, where they can no longer label you as non-essential if the governor or somebody else in government thinks that, well, your job is just not important enough and we're going to declare you non-essential and we're going to restrict what you're able to do. He's got a bill to deal with that. Hey, if you have a news story that you want to alert us to, be sure to send us an email at tennesseeinformer.tv@gmail.com. And now a quick word from our sponsor, LifeWave, a unique product that uses light reflection to activate the body's own natural energy, supporting healing, improving performance, and combating aging without drugs or stimulants. Check it out, and we'll be right back with our guest, Tiffany Boyd.
Light, the energy of life itself. Since the beginning of time, light has sustained us, fueled our growth, and shaped the world. Even Einstein recognized that everything we are is made of light. But what if we could harness the light within us, not just to live, but to renew, restore, and rejuvenate? Introducing LifeWave X39, the first product in the world that activates stem cells using our body's own light. Backed by clinical research, multiple patents, and over 10 years of stem cell research, a revolutionary wearable light technology that unlocks the power of activating our own stem cells with a single, safe, affordable, non-transdermal patch that puts you back in control of how you look, feel, and perform. Unlike drugs or chemicals, X39 works naturally, awakening your body's ability to heal and thrive. It's time to unlock your full potential, restore your vitality, and embrace a healthier, more vibrant you.
Now to our guest, Tiffany Boyd. Hey, thanks for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, but we're going to have to stop meeting like this. Maybe at some point there'll be good news to share.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I've ever had you on when we had good news, but okay. So let's get right to it. For those that are not familiar with the organization, can you tell us a little bit about what it does and why you started it?
Absolutely. Our organization, Free Your Children, we have a nationwide footprint and we seek to equip citizens with the information that they need to better protect their families. And so the information that we put out there, we feel like the public needs to know. We know and understand that the citizenry as a whole needs to be better educated on these educational agendas that we see that are coming through not only our legislature in Tennessee, but across the United States. I just recently gave expert education testimony on behalf of an SEL bill in the state of Utah in their house there, and that testimony can be accessed over on our Free Your Children YouTube channel. And the topic there was social emotional learning that is in schools. I have just recently penned an article for the Borough Pulse about this that will be released soon, so be watching for that. And this ties into how this is also happening in Tennessee as well, and how parents and citizens need to, what they need to know and what they need to understand about this agenda. So we try to bring information to the public, not just about homeschooling. I think some people have misinterpreted Free Your Children as just a homeschool advocacy group, and that is a cornerstone of what we do, because we do believe that parents are the most equipped to provide education to their children. And of course, we believe that homeschooling is more than just, the 3 R's. We believe that it is a way of life and a way for parents to be able to influence their children and instill values in them, specifically if you're a Christian. So we're always going to encourage parents to take that leap, because we believe that that is the best educational option for children. However, we do track what is going on in the public school system in Tennessee and across the nation. And of course, in Tennessee, they never fail to disappoint. And we have a plethora of bills this legislative session that are extremely concerning, and several of which are working in tandem with one another, just like they did last legislative session, unfortunately.
Yeah. So if they want to get involved, they can just go to your website and sign up?
Absolutely. freeyourchildren.com, and find out more information and connect with us there.
Okay. So, hey, let's get to the pending legislation and what concerns you have.
Absolutely. Well, there are several bills in Tennessee. One made a massive gain in our state, and that is Senate Bill 1968 by Senator Adam Lowe. And if you've been tracking or following Free Your Children on our social media pages, and if you're not, I highly encourage you to do so. You know that from right out of the gate, when he first brought this particular bill, well, actually what he did was he filed a similar bill prior to this one, and the intentions were the same for that bill as well. And of course, we pushed back and he withdrew that bill. And then he filed this current bill, which is Senate Bill 1968, which did pass on the Senate floor today. And the interesting thing that happened with this particular bill recently was last week, this bill was heard in one of the Senate Education Committees. And he made the statement that he had filed an amendment to this bill. However, the amendment was not made public so that we could read that particular wording of that amendment. And actually, at that point, it was not even an amendment. It was a fiscal memorandum. And of course, a fiscal memorandum, for those who may not understand, does not change the language of the bill. It's just an interpretation. So, of course, we read the fiscal amendment, or the fiscal memorandum to that particular bill, and we knew that it did not impact the actual bill language. And even the language in that fiscal memorandum did not rectify the issues that we were having with this piece of legislation. So this morning, we actually went to the Tennessee General Assembly website to see if there had been an actual amendment filed to Senate Bill 1968, and it had not. And then I have some law firms, more than one, that reach out to me on occasion to ask my opinions regarding legislation that is moving through the assembly here in Tennessee. And one of the bills was this particular bill by Lowe. And they said that the amendment was up. Well, it wasn't when we had looked. So we immediately went, looked, sure enough, it was finally up. So we pulled that amendment, printed it out so we could cross-reference and redline the original bill with the amendment. So I have heard the recorded now video from the floor that happened in the Senate today, where they made claims that this particular bill would not affect homeschooling families, which is definitely not true.
What's the gist
So-
of this bill? What is the main thing that it's focused on?
It's a truancy bill. I like to call it the truancy trap bill because what this bill does is it prevents an exit from the public school system for parents in the state of Tennessee. So currently in the state of Tennessee, there is no law on the books that states a parent cannot withdraw their child from public school and re-enroll them in a private school or a legal homeschooling option in the state of Tennessee at any point. This bill seeks to do just that. And the judge that brought this bill to Senator Lowe for him to sponsor it publicly stated over on our social media page that this particular bill was essentially, he and Senator Lowe were actually having quite a interesting dialogue over on that page about this bill. And so they wanted to close the loophole that was allowing parents to remove their children from public schools when they had gotten involved in the truancy intervention system, in the truancy intervention tiered model, intervention model
Right.
that the juvenile judges are instituting in their courts.
Yeah.
And so, of course, if anyone remembers, Free Your Children was over in the Coffee County Juvenile Justice Center several years ago when we were watching as a juvenile judge there was denying parents the right to homeschool their children, which is unconstitutional because there is no law in the state of Tennessee that prevents that. So there were actually parents who were finding themselves caught up in this truancy trap, this truancy pipeline, and they had been referred to the juvenile judges and they were coming to court, for a hearing to find out if their child was being adjudicated as unruly, because if your student misses a certain number of unexcused absences, 5 or more unexcused absences in the state of Tennessee, and you find yourself in the juvenile court system, your child could be potentially adjudicated as unruly. And so there were parents that when they were receiving these letters from their school district and from the juvenile court, saying that they had to come to court for a truancy hearing or this process had begun, they were removing their children from public schools and they were enrolling them in a private homeschool option, a private school option or a legal homeschooling option in the state of Tennessee. Well, of course, we all know that when children are removed from the public school system, then that school system loses money.
Yeah.
Yes,
I just want to
absolutely.
clarify something on this. So this, all right, it's built around truancy. Now, is the standard for truancy the same in all LEAs across the state?
No.
So it's not necessarily 5 days.
Right. No, it's not. So what happens is each school district per Tennessee state law creates their own tiered truancy model plan. And then once the third tier of that plan is reached, and they can differ because a neighboring county to where I live, Lawrence County, sought to set their truancy intervention at 3 or more days of unexcused absences. So they can.
I'm sorry, hit on that a little bit because this is also the school system determining what's unexcused. It's
correct.
Now, we're not just talking about
Yes.
some kid is skipping school and smoking dope. We're talking
No.
they don't accept the parent's reason
Correct.
for this
Correct.
kid missing school.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, Dave, because a kindergartner could potentially be adjudicated for unruly under this particular piece of legislation, a kindergartner. So when you look at unexcused absences, there could be a child that is experiencing bullying in the school system, and mom and dad have decided that or mom or dad or grandparents, whoever has custody of those children and makes those educational decisions for the child, child may have decided that it's not safe to send their child to school because they need to get some issues worked out within the school system, or they're addressing, mental health issues with the child, or the child may have a chronic illness. They could have, some type of illness that the parents are fully qualified to manage at home, and it does not require them, to run to the doctor every time the child doesn't feel like going to school or could not potentially make it through a school day because of this illness that they're dealing with. It completely strips away the parent's ability to be able to make those decisions. You have to have a doctor's note. And in Lawrence County, when they were trying to set their truancy model plan, if a child were to attend school and get sick and the school nurse were to send that child home, they were even considering making those unexcused absences if the child was sent home at the behest of the school nurse. So this is such a huge issue, and I think that every single parent, all of them, no matter how they're educating their children in the state of Tennessee, should be concerned about this particular piece of legislation. This is not a homeschooling bill. It still affects homeschooling families. It also affects public school families. It also affects private school families. It also affects citizens who don't even have children in the school system, because what we're talking about is a violation of our constitutional rights, and that should concern everyone. Yeah. And so I think, what you need to understand with this bill is they're trying to create a roadblock for parents to be able to exit the public school system, and they're using truancy to do just that. So as I was talking about this amendment that he had supposedly filed, it was not even available to the public until at some point late morning or early afternoon. And so when we found out that it had finally been uploaded to the Tennessee General Assembly website, we printed it out and we redlined it with the original bill. And so, he was claiming that the amended language protected the homeschooling community because they removed the verbiage of Tier 2. But Tier 3 still remains. So if a family finds themselves caught up in this truancy trap pipeline and they are sent to the judge under this Tier 3 intervention, and of course the school system, makes a decision based on when they feel like their interventions are no longer working, and then it is referred to a juvenile judge. Once that happens, if this bill is passed, into law, this will give a juvenile judge the ability to potentially decide what a child's educational path will look like, and the parents will have no say-so. Yeah. It will be up to that particular juvenile judge, which, again, is a gross intrusion on parental authority, and of course it is unconstitutional because parents have a right to home educate their children or remove them and put them in a private school. And so this bill is extremely
Let me ask you this real quick. Let me ask you. So you said this bill, it was amended on the Senate floor today?
It was supposedly it was amended last Wednesday when it was in committee. And Senator Pody seconded that amendment, but it was not available to the public. And at that point in time, it was a fiscal memorandum. It was not an amendment that changed the actual language of the bill. So then today, when it went to committee, the amendment was attached. And then they voted on the amendment first, which is the legislative process. They voted on the amendment first, and then they voted on the actual bill, and it flew through the Senate with flying colors.
So the Senate committee or the Senate floor?
The Senate floor.
So let me ask you this, because normally if they have an amendment, and if it's not a timely, did they have to request for an untimely amendment to be accepted? Because normally if that amendment has not already been given to the committee prior to hearing it, it's known as an untimely amendment, and they have to take a vote to accept or not. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I'm sure they would have accepted it, but that's my understanding of the procedure. And, I'm sure there's some arcane rule somewhere that I don't know about, but it sounds to me like this thing was basically, let's hide it till the last minute. What do you think their overall motivation for doing is this? Is this just keeping dollars in the public schools, and is it also making sure we can control as many kids and families as possible?
Both. Absolutely. We've been warning about this. There are multiple bills, again, like I said, that are working in tandem with one another in our legislature. And this bill is actually working in tandem with another bill that we're going to discuss, because when the juvenile judge was weighing in about this particular issue, and he made a public Facebook post, which we shared, where he emphatically stated that what they're doing with the truancy courts is they are preventing the loss of the much needed funding, the appropriate funding for public schools. So he didn't make any bones about what, the bottom line is. And then, of course, when we were having that discussion with Senator Lowe and this particular judge over on, the Facebook page, Senator Lowe emphatically stated that this bill would not allow people to hide behind their, homeschool label. So this is most definitely what they're trying to do. And in addition to that, this particular judge said that the majority of families who find themselves trapped within the truancy pipeline and decide to remove their children from school are choosing to utilize a legal homeschooling option in Tennessee, which includes Penn Foster, which is an accredited online school. So then we see legislation specifically targeting Penn Foster this legislative session as well, that we're going to be talking about as we move through the show.
Well, do you want to hit that one now? Do you want to go ahead and move to that one?
We can do this if you would like. That's Adam Mabry's bill. Let me find my paperwork here to tell you what the number is on this one. It is, I think we had it in the queue to go last, I believe. So
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's House Bill 1896. So Representative Aaron Mabry brought this bill and sponsored it. And again, very interesting commentary that he was involved in on our Free Your Children page, where he claimed that we were unable to read bill language, but apparently Representative Mayberry couldn't read his own bill, because he was claiming that this bill was only going to affect adults and was not going to affect children in any way. But if you read the bill, that is not what it says at all. It actually says just the opposite of that. And if you read it, Section 1, Part B clearly states, in order to operate in this state as an approved Category 3 non-public school, the State Board of Education shall require a private school described in subsection A that serves students in any of the grades 9 through 12 to administer a nationally standardized achievement test, and then it goes on from there. So clearly, that was, what.
Well, maybe he has a lot of adults in his district that are in grades 9 through 12.
Maybe so. It was, Michael Lotfi of AFP, and of course, we know that AFP, Americans for Prosperity, is promoting Aaron Mabry as well, because he's a huge voucher advocate.
Right.
So we're seeing a continuum of that as we move through, the years, as school choice begins to advance. The writing is really on the wall who's doing the bidding for these legislators. But the interesting thing about this is that this particular bill would focus on Penn Foster, because, and I did a legislative update about this, but it's really important to note that this particular bill is talking about Category 3 non-public schools that are regionally accredited by one of the accrediting agencies listed in the state board policy. Some of these Category 3 schools also have national accreditation from the Distance Education Accrediting Commission, and one of those is Penn Foster.
What is you called it a level 3 or what?
Category 3.
What is a Category 3 school?
Yes.
What is that?
Category 3 school is an accredited distance learning online school in the state of Tennessee. And that is actually a recognized, designated legal homeschooling category in this particular state. So even though the students are not considered homeschool students, it's still a legal accepted category for homeschooling in the state of Tennessee. And that's one reason why we have so many issues with our homeschool laws in Tennessee, is because the lines are blurred. And that is one of the reasons why we have pushed back against current homeschool laws in our state, is because it's muddying the waters. And when you start tightening the screws to particular categories of home education in the state of Tennessee, it puts every other category at risk because it's incrementalism.
All
And
right.
once you start, making more laws and rules and regulations on one category, it's very easy for them to amend, that particular wording and apply
Yep.
that to other categories of homeschooling in the state of Tennessee. So we have a free for all in our Tennessee General Assembly, and they have, come out swinging in an attempt to attack multiple different categories of homeschooling this legislative session. But again, it's so important for citizens to understand that this is not just about homeschooling. We have to decide as a citizenry in the state of Tennessee, do we really believe that children belong to the parents, or do we believe that they belong to the state?
Right.
Do we believe that judges should be making educational decisions for our children in the state of Tennessee, or do we believe that parents have the right to do that? Because right now, our Tennessee legislature is a runaway train, and they believe that the state has more authority over children than their parents.
We talked about this some last week with the other
Yes.
with Mr. Thornton, and we don't think about it, but these compulsory attendance laws, and he made the point that it's compulsory attendance, not compulsory education, because I guess the state doesn't actually define education. I thought that was a good point. Our grandparents or great grandparents in some cases accepted that, okay, we're now going to tell you have to send your kid from this age to this age to go spend 8 hours with somebody else every day. And we accepted it. But really, you're right. That is a total violation of rights, but we're so used to it.
It is, but the ironic thing about that is there are other states in the United States that do know that there's an issue with this, and they do not have to abide by those compulsory attendance, regulations. And their states do believe that children belong to their parents and not the government. And of course, last legislative session, when we ran the Free Act, that was exactly what we were attempting to do in our state. And of course, our Republican legislators in the House killed that bill because on the basis of we would potentially abuse our children if we were given, true educational autonomy. So that's a snapshot of exactly, what our legislature feels about parental rights and educational rights and constitutional rights in our state. And every single session, they encroach more and more with more regulation. And one of the big issues with homeschooling is in the state of Tennessee is every year we have more and more unconstitutional laws that are being passed with very few organizations or entities pushing back when they're all unconstitutional, because our Tennessee state constitution does not address homeschooling or private school. It only addresses a free public education. That is their only job. Their job is not to regulate parents who are home educating, and it's not to regulate private schools. And we have continually allowed those rights to be eroded away by the passing of more and more and more unconstitutional legislation, and no one is asking any questions about this. So one of Free Your Children's major missions and goals for future legislative sessions is to begin the attempt to repeal these unconstitutional laws regulating homeschooling and private schooling in the state of Tennessee before it's too late.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that more people aren't being proactive instead of reactive, because once these items pass into law, it's too late almost. Then you have an even bigger fight where we should be pushing back and preventing this from happening in the first place. But we do believe education is key. And so, we're working as hard as we possibly can to educate people on why you should be concerned about these bills, why you should be contacting your legislators. And 1968, this particular bill, it's passed the Senate floor, as I mentioned today. It goes on to the House tomorrow. So tomorrow at 3 p.m., it will be in the Education Administration Subcommittee.
Right.
It's number 7 on the agenda, and the committee starts at 3 p.m. So you need to contact your representatives on that particular Education Administration Subcommittee. Tell them that this bill needs to be killed, that it's unconstitutional, that it is an intrusion of parental authority, that it could potentially prevent parents from being able to homeschool their children or send them to a private school, and that juvenile judges have no authority when it comes to determining a child's educational path. And we need to make our voices loud and clear. And so I hope that if you're listening to this, that you will head over to Free Your Children, or maybe Dave has them listed somewhere, the names to the emails and the phone numbers to the legislators that you can contact in this particular committee. I know that we have them on our post about this bill over on the Free Your Children social media pages. You can also sign up for our free newsletter, and we will have the information, listed there as well. But this is something, you don't need to wait. You need to act now and tell them to kill this bill.
So that's House Bill 1823, which is the House companion bill for Senate Bill 1968. What about Mayberry's bill, or Mabry? When's his bill in committee?
Tomorrow. It's tomorrow in the K-12 subcommittee at 9 a.m.
Okay.
And so we will have, that listed as well over on the Free Your Children page with the legislators that you can contact to tell them to kill that bill as well. So again, as I said before, lots of different bills working in tandem with one another this legislative session to erode freedoms. And Dave, I don't know about you, but anytime they claim that they have an amendment or they file an amendment and the general public is not given ample opportunity to preview it and to ask questions and have discussions, then that has to cause everyone, or should cause everyone, to pause and say, why are they trying to ram this through without giving, citizens in Tennessee an opportunity to discuss these?
It should be required that it be up there at least 24, if not 48 hours prior to it appearing in committee. And hey, we do have those bills. We'll pop them up again in a minute. So audience, if get your pen and paper ready to write these down. I don't necessarily have the phone numbers to call, but if you got to have the bill number anyway. And you can go to Free Your Children, I'm sure, and get the right committee, the numbers.
Yep.
So there was a couple other bills that we had to talk about.
Yeah, you talked about one in your opening there, and of course that was the bill that would prevent citizens from holding the state of Tennessee accountable if they violate their constitution, and we sounded the alarm about that as well.
I do want to say something about that real quick, though. I think that bill is twofold. I think it has two aims. Number one, they're really irritated with the Tennessee Firearms Association because Tennessee Firearms Association, the whole Hughes v. Lee deal, even though Tennessee Firearms Association is not the one that actually filed the lawsuit. However, John Harris of the TFA did do the arguing in court. And so I think they resent that they lost that case, so they don't want to even be questioned. And then I think the other portion of the other reason that they're trying to do that is the vouchers.
Yes, absolutely.
And that in general, they just want to be able to pass something and tell us to sit down and shut up. That's their whole goal.
Absolutely, and that is exactly what I was going to say in relation to the voucher bill, was that they know that it's unconstitutional. They do not want citizens calling that out. So of course, if this bill 1958 passes, then that will give them the ability to stomp the necks of the citizens in Tennessee and say, you have no recourse, to heck with the Constitution. We're going to do whatever we want to do, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I think that, and then that goes right back to this Senate bill that just passed the Senate floor with what Lowe is trying to do with this unconstitutional bill that denies, parents the right to make educational decisions, for their children. So all of these bills are unconstitutional, and citizens are wising up, and they don't want them asking questions.
Don't you have at least one or two other cheery bills to talk about?
Yes, there's another one, House Bill 1729 by Representative Slater. This is what we call the CLT bill that we have pushed back on. He had promised his constituents, and there had been a whole lot of discussion from other organizations that had contacted me claiming that he was going to have an amendment attached to this bill. There is not an amendment attached to this bill. This bill actually adds additional cumbersome regulations to Category 1 homeschooling. So again, another bill tightening the screws to homeschooling, another category of homeschooling. And we have other concerns with this bill. CLT, Classic Learning Initiatives, the company that produces this particular particular standardized test is a huge advocate of school choice. And of course, Slater was asked by a constituent if this company had applied to be a vendor for the state of Tennessee on the Education Freedom Scholarship Act, and he did confirm that they have indeed applied to be a vendor. So again, that goes back to my question of why are we passing bills, especially bills that add, cumbersome regulations that could potentially be signed into law that are unconstitutional in the first place, regulating a homeschool category in Tennessee. And we're doing this at the behest of a private company that plans to benefit from the taxpayers by applying to be a vendor under the Education Freedom Scholarship Act, because that list of vendors is not public record.
Really?
We are not allowed to access that vendor list in the state of Tennessee. So your tax dollars are being used.
How can you not be able to see the vendors? How is that even legal?
You tell me. It's not, they will not allow us to see those. And I have had other people comment when I posted about this, about those vendor lists not being made public in the state of Tennessee. And they reiterated the same complaint in their state. And they made the comment that it was not public in their state either. And the excuse they were given was that the vendors were being threatened.
Okay, so a couple things here on the CLT. You say they're pro school choice, which basically they're for the vouchers. Okay,
absolutely.
So the CLT itself is going to be part of this bill, and then they're encouraging the vouchers, which are unconstitutional and are tax payments to private individuals. Now, but let me ask you this: as far as CLT goes, now I think they're doing this in lieu of the ACT and the SAT. Is that the intent of using the CLT?
They're claiming that it would give parents an option, but the ironic part about that is if Representative Slater was actually interested in giving parents an option in the state of Tennessee, then it would beg the question, why would he kill the FREE Act last legislative session when that gave parents a true educational option in this state?
Let me ask you this. How much do you know about CLT? I mean, is it a better test than the ACT or SAT? Do you know?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you're asking, but here's what you need to understand is when you become a vendor for any type of school choice program, you are signing a contract with the federal government. And so so what does that contract look like? What are their standards going to have to be going to look like compared to the ACT and the SAT standards? Because the whole goal of school choice is just like Common Core, to align everyone to the same standards. Right. So why would a company that claims that it's a different and better option want to participate in a government program who seeks to align all forms of education, into, a government controlled system, which is exactly what's happening with these programs. If they were, we may be having a different conversation if that wasn't the issue here, but that is one of the fundamental issues with this. But also, if you look at the bill, which again has not been amended, it clearly states if a homeschool student does not test proficient in a subject matter tested pursuant to the subdivision as demonstrated by the student scoring a performance level rating of approaching. So there's all of these caveats that, if a homeschool student is not testing proficiently, they have to go through all of these additional steps, which will then be, signed into law. And additionally, with this particular piece of legislation, the test would not be allowed to be proctored by an individual, who is related to the student, and it would have to be recorded by the developer of the nationally normed examination. And historically, that has not been the case because I was a proctor. I'm a college graduate. I have a teaching license, and so I was a qualified test proctor for years in the past, and so I could administer a standardized test, the Stanford to be exact, to my own children, as long as I was also testing other students. This bill would prevent you from being able to do that.
And this coming from a school system, from a state that we don't have the greatest scores, and we've been working at education now since the Common Core days, and our numbers are not that much better, if they're better at all. And we won't even hold people back for not meeting the standard.
Correct. But yet you want to enforce additional regulations on homeschool students who statistically outperform public and private schools. And so, we're adamantly opposed to this particular piece of legislation for multiple different reasons. We do not need any more unconstitutional laws regulating homeschooling in the state of Tennessee. This needs to stop. Every single legislative session, they beat us to death over the head with all of these bills that seek to serve the same agenda, which is to, tighten the screws to the freedoms of the citizens that live in the state of Tennessee. And my question is, when are citizens going to have enough? When are they going to say that is enough?
Yeah. And then I think we got the voucher bill. We just
Yes.
instituted it last year, and now they want to open it up even more. They want to go bigger on being unconstitutional.
Absolutely.
What's the number of that bill, the voucher bill?
The number of that bill is.
I know Lambert is the sponsor, the House sponsor.
Yes.
There we go.
There you go.
2532.
Yeah, 25. Yes. And that particular bill, anyone that if you're familiar with Free Your Children at all, you know that we are opposed to all forms of government-funded private education. We know that program, seeks to destroy true educational freedom by making all forms of education government controlled. And it is a scam that's been, sold. They've had great marketing to convince parents that this is the answer, but it's a trap, and it's a trap that many parents are falling for. And, I've written extensively on this topic and even shown what these programs have looked like in other states and how it is infringing on freedoms of parents who are unfortunately choosing to participate in this program. And one common theme is well-being checks on students and families.
Yeah, I remember Penny Schwinn tried that garbage during COVID.
Absolutely.
Are there any national groups out there that, in your opinion, undermine homeschool parents that people probably think are good organizations at the national level?
I think that and I've shared this extensively. I've written about this, so you can go to freeyourchildren.com and pull up the articles that I have read here, written and have posted on the website, and also they're posted on the Borough Pulse under my author page, which is Tiffany Boyd at the Borough Pulse. What I'm finding with many of the national organizations, specifically the ones that I have written about, and of course those are public record now, is that many organizations, they claim that they are fighting to preserve rights, but they seem to be tied in some way to organizations and individuals and entities that are actually promoting school choice and the school choice agenda. So you will see ties to organizations that all flow back to the same money, that's coming from those that are trying to advance these different programs in the states across, the U.S., because it's a massive push. So, there are a lot of them out there, and many of them you will see familiar names. The Heritage Foundation has been involved in the expansion of school choice, the Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity, and the list, goes on and on and on. And I'll link, that particular article where people can read that information in its entirety, so people can go and read about that and then do their own research. So that's what I would really encourage people to do, is that if any organization is telling you, we've got it taken care of, we'll handle it, you sit at home, you wait for our direction before you contact legislators or before you start asking questions, that's a huge red flag. We do not want to do that. We don't want men or women in suits lobbying for us. Okay, we want citizens to be educated themselves, and we want them to exercise their own voices, and we want them to have conversations with their legislators so that they understand that the general population is actually educated on this. Because anytime you allow another organization, especially if you do not know, where their funding is coming from, and you may not, know if they have any conflicts of interest, you are gambling, with your freedoms there. So I think that, you're much better off if you're educated yourself and that you speak for yourself. And that's what we encourage people to do. When we show up at the Capitol, we want other people to come up there with us. We want you to come and speak to those representatives and those legislators, those senators yourself. We don't want, to do it on your behalf. We want you to join us there.
Are there any good national organizations out there that actually support homeschool, in your opinion?
I think that that's a loaded question. I don't. I'm very hesitant to name any specifically that I would promote without doing my
You can take the fifth. That's okay.
yeah, without doing my research on those. And that's what I encourage every single citizen to do
Yeah.
is to do your research on every single organization. That you may find something that concerns you, you may not, but you definitely need to do your research and always follow the money. I do know that, we have thought that there have been organizations that would be helpful in this fight only to find out that they were undermining what we were actually trying to accomplish because there was a conflict of interest or they had someone sitting on a board somewhere that could benefit from something that we were opposed to or some entity that we were opposed to. And that's one thing that I want to point out. I'm not a politician. I do not sit on any government appointed committees or government appointed boards. I'm just a mom who happens to have an extensive background in education of 30 plus years, who has homeschooled her own children for 22 years. I'm a former public school teacher, so I've been inside the system, and I've devoted my entire life to researching and educating others on what's really going on in terms of education. But my only motivation in doing this is freedom. And that's it, because there's nothing else for me to gain. And many other entities cannot say the same. We are funding Free Your Children primarily out of our own personal budgets. We do have occasionally people to make donations to Free Your Children to help us continue to do the work that we do, but they're not large NGOs. They
Right.
are just like-minded citizens who believe in our message and who are dedicated to freedom.
And you have seminars, but now your seminars cover, it's not just going to be about school if you host a seminar.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
One other thing I want to say before we get further along, school choice. Everybody, when you hear school choice, well, yeah, everybody should have school choice. Parents should have school choice. But what people don't understand is they're going to take tax dollars and they're going to give them to individuals whose kids then will attend a private school or may, in many cases, like in Tennessee, already in private school and have been in private
Correct.
school. That's where we know that, or that's where we have good reasons to suspect that most of the vouchers have already gone to. And so our state constitution is pretty clear. The state is supposed to fund public education. It's not supposed to fund private education. And so that's where I think that's a play on words. I think it's deceptive because, well, who would be against school choice?
Right. It's a great marketing strategy, but I like to say that what they're selling is government school choice. We already have school choice. The parents already have the ability to send their children to public school, private school, or homeschool. What they're talking about is government school choice, which is taxpayer funded school choice, which, as you said, pays for parents to send their children to private institutions, or in some states, homeschool them, which is exactly what they're headed to in Tennessee. That's the goal. They've made it very clear that their goal is to also include homeschoolers in this. And homeschoolers across the nation are getting swallowed up in these initiatives, and they do not want to be, placed under this umbrella. And the problem is, once one homeschool Tennessee, the majority of homeschools. So again, Tennessee may. It is a shame that over several decades, no one has made an attempt to change, other than the Free Act, those unconstitutional laws regulating homeschooling and private school in this state. And they've only gotten worse. And so to not see organizations opposing additional homeschooling legislation and private school legislation is just appalling to me, because you can't claim that you support freedoms of parents and then promote pieces of legislation that do the exact opposite.
With the Free Act's not coming back this year. You guys going to bring it back next year?
I think, well, we have already made public that our plans for next legislative session will be to repeal the unconstitutional laws regulating homeschooling and regulating private schooling in Tennessee. So that's what you're going to see from For Your Children next legislative session.
Speaking of seminars, you're going to be at the Stewart Henry TFA meeting on March 31st in Stewart County. It'll be the Stewart County Visitor Center. That's 117 Visitor Center Lane in Dover, Tennessee. And the topic is education and the Second Amendment. So you're going to kind of hit two big areas there. And looking forward to that. And hey, everybody's invited. You don't have to be a member of the TFA to attend this. And that is 7 p.m. March 31st at the Stewart County Visitor Center in Dover, Tennessee. And I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. We're excited about that one.
Are there any other events you need to announce?
That's all we have on the calendar right now. One of our team members has a grandbaby that's due in just a few weeks, so we're scheduling our events around her newest blessing that is coming, and so we are excited for her about that. Again, we are just a group of families and moms that are out here advocating for citizens and fighting for their freedoms while we're trying to do, all the things that families have to do, like raising our children and homeschooling our children and serving as wives and mothers and parents and working additional jobs. So what we do really truly is the definition of grassroots, and I even hate to use that terminology. It's been so overused at this point,
kind of like conservative.
Yeah. But again, that's who we are and what we do. And we, work within a limited budget, and we just, allow God to lead us. And, he always makes a way for us to be able to do the work that we feel like he's called us to do.
freeyourchildren.com. Go to the website, check it out. Hey, thanks for being with us, and thanks for what you do.
Thank you for having me, David. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon at the seminar.
Absolutely. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Our goal is to have 1,000 subscribers. We didn't make it by the end of February, but I think we need maybe a little less than 70. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do and share us with your friends. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. A couple of announcements real quick. Monty Fritz will be speaking at Trousdale County this Thursday, March 5th, 6:30 p.m. at the Grace Baptist Church, 550 McMurray Boulevard East in Hartsville, Tennessee. He will be speaking Saturday, March 7th to the Robertson County GOP at the Purpose Life Church, 805 Memorial Boulevard in Springfield, Tennessee at 8:30 a.m. Central. Next week's guest is... Well, we had to make a change to that. Our guest next week, we were going to have a new author, but we're going to have Shahram Hadian, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. He'll correct me when he sees me. Shahram Hadian, he escaped from Iran when he was very young, and he is now a pastor. And, hey, I think this is pretty good time, and I appreciate him being able to step up and join us next week. So that'll be next Monday at 7 p.m. We are not done yet tonight, though. We'll be back at 8:30 p.m. with our second show of the night with guest Joseph Sansone, Dr. Joseph Sansone, here to discuss legislation that declares mRNA vaccines a bioweapon. And oh, yes, they are. You need to hear this. Please take the time to check out the other shows brought to you by West Tennessee TV by going to westtntv.com or myparistv.com. There you can find links to the Mike Weatherford Show and Sportscast with Jeremy Bucklow. Tomorrow, Mike is joined by Teresa Carter with an incredible story about being switched at birth and revelation that changed everything. Then next Sunday, Jeremy is joined by Jackie Beard, multi-sport star that has already been approached by several colleges and universities with football offers. That's it for now. Good night from Paris. Tennessee, that is.